Here's your agenda for today. We're going to kind of talk about, really, we're going to focus in about the things you need to do before you put pen to paper, because if you don't think through what it is you want to do next, no matter how quickly you write your resume, it's not going to convey what it should convey. So we're going to talk a little bit about that. Then we're going to go through the resume, kind of through all the different sections of a resume to give you some good tips in terms of that. And without further ado, I'm just going to quickly tell you a little bit about my company, because I assume if you're here listening to this or listening to the recording, you are probably looking for work. And I own a company called FlexProfessionals. I'm one of three owners of Flex. And we are essentially a staffing firm, but our niche is part-time flexible work. So what we really do is we help local employers, mostly small businesses, nonprofits, and associations, embrace a flexible work model as a way of bringing on a higher level of talent. And so our talent who is drawn to this part-time model tend to be caregivers. They tend to be professionals that have gaps in their resumes due to caregiving. Sometimes it's childcare, sometimes it's elder care, and sometimes it's for other personal reasons. They've taken time off and they're looking to get back into the workforce, but they don't want to do it full time. And others are working full time and they've been there and done that with working 40+ hours a week. And they're looking at flexibility, either to do some project work or to meet demands at home. And so we work with professionals scaling back, and we also work with professionals in transition. So oftentimes I call them second career professionals, people who've had long, extensive experience in one field, and they're just ready to make a change. So we've worked with over 700 employers in the DC and Boston metro areas. And we've worked with over 16,000 candidates in the DC metro area. And we'd love to work with you. So I will give you my contact information at the end, because we really are a great resource for those, especially in Loudoun County. We've got lots of great Loudoun County employers that are looking for really good talent. So we'd love to see your resume. It doesn't cost you anything to put your resume into our system, but we could potentially find a good job for you. So if you leave this webinar early, or if you, like many people in my family, have ADD and are easily distracted, my hope is that you will remember this one thing. And that is that you can spend hours and hours and hours working on your resume. And I even would argue that some people hide behind their computer, tweaking their resume and think that they're job searching by doing that. But remember this. Most people who are in the position to put you in the yes pile for, I will consider this person further, or the no pile, I'm not going to look any further or reach out to this person for an interview. Most of those people that have that power, a recruiter, an HR manager, the hiring manager, they don't spend a whole lot of time looking at your resume. I probably look at hundreds and hundreds of resumes each week, and I probably spend less than 10 seconds before I make a judgment. So it's expensive real estate. What you say is important, but also remember that people are just glossing over your resume before they make a decision. So the important things have to pop out, have to stand out. And the other thing this is telling you is that it's really just to entice somebody. This resume is just to entice somebody to want to look at you further. So what are you facing? You're facing a lazy reader, especially this day with social media, with lots of video, with lots of graphics. We don't like to look at words anymore. So a lot of white space is good. Making things pop, not diluting the good stuff by having too much on your resume is really important. The second thing is that your resume shouldn't look like somebody else's. It's an art. It's not a science. Your story is different from somebody else's story. And I say that because sometimes we tend to look at other people's resumes and go, oh, wow, that looks great. Like just visually, it looks pretty. can I have a copy of your resume? You start to plug your bullets and your details into somebody else's resume. And a lot of times it doesn't work. So don't worry so much about the style. Try to think about the importance of conveying your story as best you can through your resume. So it might look different from somebody else's. And rules can be broken. Especially true for people in transition. So people changing career fields and people who have gaps in their resumes, even short gaps. The typical resume might not work for you. So think about what it is that you want to convey. And my best piece of advice to you is that so much of this is subjective. So even today, I might give you some ideas or some tips that really resonate with you. And I might give you some tips that you're like, I'm not so sure if that's for me. If it's not for you, don't do it. I can't tell you how many times I interview candidates and I look at their resume and I learn their career story and I say to them, why did you put that down? Or why did you say it this way? Or why did you do this? And they look at me and they go, oh, because somebody told me to do that. And so I did it. And so a lot of times job seekers aren't confident, especially if you're trying to transition or if you've been out of work for a while. And you tend to think that somebody with a really good title or who makes a lot of money knows what they're doing in terms of resumes. I would caution you, if somebody doesn't ask you, what do you want to do next? What are your career goals? What kind of place do you want to work in? What kind of environment? If they're not asking you those questions, then they're not giving you good resume advice. They need to know that first. So after having said all of that, my biggest point here is that your resume really is just to entice people to want to talk to you further. So it's really a selling tool. It's really the opportunity, and a lot of candidates we work with tend to be more seasoned professionals. At FlexProfessionals, we only work with candidates with 10 plus years of experience. A lot of them are uncomfortable selling themselves. But I would say that if there's any time that's really appropriate for you to sell yourself, it's through your resume and during an interview. So make sure that you see this as a selling tool. So as I said just early on in this webinar, I talked about how people tend to jump to fix their resume. That's the first thing they do. They're going to leave work. They're looking for a job. They've been out of work. I got to redo my resume. And I really think that it's important that you take a step back before you jump and start to edit, to really do some self-exploration. Because if you don't, when you come into interview, I can tell. So I see somebody's resume and it's all over the place. And it's all over the place. And I say to the person, so what are you looking for? And they say to me, you know, I've been out of work for a while. I just don't really know what's out there. I'm kind of open. And that's not the answer you want to give a recruiter. You don't have to tell me exactly what you want to do in terms of a job title, but you want to tell me what you're good at, what your sweet spot is. And so that's why you need to think this through before you start to put this down on paper. So just breaking it down, and we only have an hour. There's lots of other areas of self-assessment, self-exploration, but these are the two key ones. And I'm just going to stop here for 1 second. If you go to our website, the address is at the bottom of this slide. Under the Job Seekers tab, we have a ton of resources for job seekers. In the first section of resources we have are job search resources, and we have an entire section in there, or subsection in there, about self-exploration and career exploration. So if you're not sure what you want to do next, you're not really feeling confident, go there. There's lots of good resources there to help kind of tease out what it is that are your strengths, what it is that are your key skills, key characteristics, okay? So step one, what are the defining characteristics, your personality traits, the things that are genuinely you, that you consistently convey no matter where you are. So you are at home with friends, you're with family, you're at work, you're doing service work. What are those key personality traits that you have that differentiate you from somebody different? A lot of times people say to me, well, Sheila, why is this important for a resume? And I'll just give you a quick example. I have, I'm hiring, I've got a team. I need to build a team of analysts and a team of project managers. And my team right now, and this is not on the job description, I've got this generic analyst job posting out there. You have no idea because it's not on there. But my team is full of people who are really creative. They like to think out of the box. They love to brainstorm, but I don't have enough closers on my team. I don't have enough people that can stick to a timeline. I don't have enough people that can bring the team in and keep us focused on our goals, our targets, our metrics. So if I'm reading a resume of 2 analysts and 1 analyst or project manager is super creative, and the other one is really good at meeting deadlines, at sticking to goals, very task-oriented, very organized, I might pick the organized candidate over the creative one. That's why this is important, okay? Second is skills. What skills or competencies do you have that no matter where you are or what you do, these are your strengths, and the second part of the sentence is most important, and that you want to use in your next job. We all have skills and really great accomplishments that we can talk about on our resume, or write about on a resume, or talk about in an interview. But if you don't like using that skill, or you just don't want to use it anymore, like maybe you're a great salesman, but you don't want to sell, then that's not the skill you want to highlight on your resume. Take it out, okay? So typically our skills fall into 3 really big categories: working with people, working with data, and working with things. And then underneath them are tons of subcategories. So what are resources to figure this out? Sometimes people get stuck here. Other times people are very clear with this part, but you need it to build that resume. So if you're looking for those personality traits, you're not quite sure what your strengths are, take a Myers-Briggs or take a Clifton Strengths Finder, or look on this link with this ONET Interest Profiler. It's a Department of Labor compository. ONET is a compository of jobs that are out there, job titles, and all the skills and competencies that you need, or certifications in order to occupy that job. And as part of this website, the Department of Labor has this 60-question test that maps types of jobs that might be of interest to you based on your personality. So that's another great place to go. Look at your performance reviews. What are your bosses saying about you in terms of your personality, your qualities? And then lastly, on our website, we have this worksheet that is up on this slide right here. It's just a great one. Go through the adjectives. Yes, this sounds like me, sounds like me, sounds like me. Then go through it a second time. Is this really me, or is this who I want to be? If it's who you want to be, take it out. If it's truly you, keep it. Then take off maybe the 10 or 20 adjectives that you come up with and start to group them and come up with a really good 2 or 3 or 4 adjectives that reflect who you are. Same thing with skills. Look at your job descriptions. Look at your performance reviews. On our website, we have a great list of best skills for resumes. It's super useful for those strong action verbs that you want to use on your resume. It's a great reference when you're writing your resume, but it's also, you can look at it and go, yes, that's the skill that I love to use. That's if it's a skill you love to use, you're going to want to highlight it on your resume. The functional skills worksheet, that's a copy of this, is on this slide. It's another great worksheet to whittle down, where am I strong? Where am I strongest? Okay. So now that you have a sense of the skills that you want to use, about the personality traits that you want to focus on and highlight in your resume, the next thing that I would do before I put anything down on paper is I would start to think through accomplishments. And the reason being is that a resume that reads like a job description, that is only job duties, doesn't make you stand out from another resume or another person. So I can read a resume and says responsible for this, responsible for that, manage this, manage that. And while it will give me a sense that, okay, this person is competent or capable of doing an HR job, it's when you put the accomplishment down that kind of starts to tell a story that engages me. That makes you memorable. That allows me as the employer to go, oh my gosh, I need somebody to do that for me. Oh, that person just helped relocate an entire 500 person headquarters and move them across country. I need that because I've got that challenge right now. Or, oh my gosh, this person helped build an HR function from the ground up and actually helped to grow an organization from 20 employees to 100 employees. Well, if I'm a 30-person organization and I'm looking to make my first HR hire, that's the kind of person I'm going to want to talk to. So that is why this is so important, thinking about what did you do? What are you proud of? It ultimately allows you to tell your story, not just on your resume, but as you interview as well. So how do you do this? You're probably, if you've been out of work for a while, if you haven't written a resume in a while, your resume probably doesn't have accomplishment bullets on it. You're going to have to dig deep, get into the details of what your jobs were, and start to talk to somebody or start to write it down. So all of us come about this differently. I'm a writer. I would probably write down in a paragraph what it is I was proud of or accomplished. And then I would whittle it down into a bullet. And often when you do that, you actually create more than one bullet because you end up finding that what your story is really more than one accomplishment. So remember, people hire you because they have a problem, they have a challenge or an opportunity. So now look back and don't just think about your paid work. This can be paid or unpaid, okay? What in your paid or unpaid experience was a problem or a challenge or an opportunity that you took on and that you succeeded in fixing or solving or creating, right? So what action did you take? What skills did you use to address that challenge or opportunity? And then what happened, right? Did it have an impact or a benefit or a positive outcome on either maybe a team or on your company internally or externally? Did it have a customer? The more you can quantify, the better. So using percentages, using increases, decreases, using numbers is great. Don't fake it, but if you can quantify, that's great. If you can't, at least identify how it benefited somebody or something, right? So again, on our website, you'll see this link from The Balance. This is just a great little article about tips for including accomplishments on resumes. But I'm going to give you some examples so you can kind of see this more in action. So my company, like I said, we work with over 16,000 job seekers. If I called every single one of those job seekers in for an interview, I would go out of business. I would spend way too much time interviewing people, and I have other work to do, and not all those people are going to be placed at clients. So it would be inefficient. But at the same time, I know that the more outreach I do, the more face-to-face time I have, the more candidates I talk to and I see, the more successful I am at making really good placements. So I started to do these webinars and workshops, in-person workshops in order to meet job seekers. COVID kind of screwed that up a little bit, but nonetheless, we are still doing these. So I could put on my resume, coordinated workshops for job seekers. It's perfectly fine. It says a lot, but it doesn't really impress me as if I'm in a hiring capacity. It doesn't really tell me enough to impress me. Better would be adding a little bit more detail and quantifying it. Using a stronger verb. I conducted 15 plus job search workshops to expand company outreach and support job seekers. A better bullet is even fine-tuning and creating stronger action verbs, designing, delivering, adding context to the number, 15 job search workshops annually. And then what happened? What was the result? It increased company outreach to candidates by 25%. That is a far more impressive bullet that tells me more about what this person could do for me than the first one. So here's some more examples. This is a candidate we worked with who was a magazine editor. She edited the Sunday supplement weekend magazine for USA Today. Okay, so that's just a job duty. It's impressive, but it doesn't tell me as much as the second bullet does. In the second bullet, she talks about how she edited more than half of each issue of USA Weekend magazine, and that she did that and maintained quality as well as harmonious relationships with a lot of high-profile writers, despite a 75% reduction in editorial staff. That's telling me as the reader a lot. A, she survived a large number of layoffs, so they must have valued her work. B, sounds like these high-profile writers were probably difficult, so she's probably not only a good editor, but she's a good communicator and she can manage difficult people. And B, or C, the fact that she edited so much of that magazine tells me that she's probably pretty efficient at what she does. So that is a bullet that's going to pique my attention and want me to say, you know what, I want to talk to this person and learn more. Here's another example. This guy was an Excel guru. He would use Excel to create efficiencies and streamline processes. So the first reads as a duty. You know, he worked for the US Budget Office and he created processes and tools. But the second two bullets tell me a lot more about the effectiveness of what he's doing and the fact that he created analytical tools to eliminate hours and hours of manual labor by a team. So again, you know, I'm a hiring manager. I've got a limited budget and I've got people on my team that do good work, but they're not very tech savvy and we could be doing things much more efficiently. I'm going to want to talk to this guy, or I'm going to look and go, oh, so he created reports that were used to present or testify before Congress by high-level Army officials. Okay, well, I'm looking at this and I can go, he can develop some reports that were presented in front of Congress by high-level officials, then I think he could probably do a pretty good job at the kinds of reports that I need, right? So this is why these accomplishments are so important. Focus on the accomplishments that you're proud of doing, that you enjoy doing, for two reasons. One, if you like it, doing it, and you're proud of it, if somebody's going to hire you to do something similar, you're probably going to get a lot of satisfaction out of your job. That's number one. Number two, when you talk about something in an interview that you enjoy doing, you exude confidence and you exude energy. So putting that on your resume is a great way to then be able to speak about it in an interview. So just a few more tips here. Make that accomplishment stand alone. So on your resume, every sentence on your resume, every bullet you have, put before it, I deserve a raise because. If you don't really deserve a raise because, you might want to consider taking it off your resume. And again, choose those strong verbs. This is another worksheet that we have on our resource page that would be helpful for you for doing that. Okay. Jeremy, are there any questions?
We did actually have one question so far, and it looks like it kind of applies to this next step. Just said, how long should a resume be? Is there such thing as having too much information on it? I know you mentioned that you want to make it kind of pop.
Yeah.
And when someone's only looking at it for 10, 15 seconds,
yep.
is there something that is having too much information on a resume?
Yep. So I hesitate to tell you it can only be X number of pages. Because sometimes, again, our stories are all different. depending upon our career stories, some might be longer than others. So I'm not going to give you an exact page number or limit, but this is what I would say. Based on my experience, most people can craft a pretty darn good resume in 1 to 2 pages. If it goes over, fine, but nobody's going to read past the second page. And most people won't read past the first page. So just remember that, again, it's just to entice. It's not to, I'll say this too. Remember that it's way more important for your resume to reflect what you want to do in the future than it is to reflect every single thing you've done in the past. Okay. So a lot of people see the resume as, I got to shove in that piece of paper, everything I've done, because God forbid I leave something out and I don't get hired because of it. Instead, start to weed out the stuff that you don't really want to do anymore. The stuff that you don't need to put in because you've already reflected it somewhere else that you have that capability. And keep it really concise because we're lazy readers. And people, and what's at that top half of the first page is probably the most important. You want the good stuff up high.
And then we had one more question concerning a chronologic versus a functional resume. So is it better to have it in in order of the year, or is it more tailoring the skills that you have for the specific job you're applying for?
So great segue. So I'll just keep on going here. There's 2 kinds of resumes. There's the chronological, and there's what's called a functional or skills-based resume. So there's lots of different opinions out there. Career coaches, if you work with a career coach, they tend to like the skills-based resume. But I'm going to show you here the 2 types. And as you'll see here on this slide, I do give the advantage and the disadvantage. The chronological is that traditional resume. It is where your most recent work experience is at the top, and then you work your way back. And underneath each job and job title are your bullets. That is sort of that traditional standard resume. The advantage, and I think this is a really important point. Again, the career coaches like you to highlight your skills, but you want your resume to be easily digestible by the person who can hire you. And most hiring managers are busy and they don't have a lot of time, and they've got a large stack of resumes in front of them. And so they're going to go through your resume quickly. And the chronological resume is easier for me personally to follow and to figure out your story. And so for that reason, I would say I write resumes for people. I would say 9 times out of 10, I use the chronological resume. The trick with the chronological is that if you have moved around a lot, or if you have a large gap in your resume or even a small one, it's very obvious, right? But there's ways around that. So a chronological resume looks like this. What I would say though, is that regardless of what resume you choose, and I'll go over the functional resume next. What's really important, I think, is that you have on the top of your resume, like this one does, some type of summary of qualifications. I tend to use the word profile. I tend to write it in short paragraph form and then have a couple of key bullets underneath that show somebody's key competencies. You can call it a summary, you can call it a profile, you can call it a highlight, doesn't matter what you call it. Just in 3 to 5 sentences or bullets, can you tell me in that profile what it is that you bring to the table? So both resumes should have that. The functional resume hits it with your skills first. So it highlights your experience based on your skills. So it could be your operations skills, your human resource skills, your accounting skills, or your organizational skills, your customer service skills. And then underneath those larger skill categories, you will have bullets of accomplishments. And then at the bottom of this resume, you have your work history. So the disadvantage is that it kind of looks like you're hiding. And my recruiting manager always says when she interviews people with functional resumes, she spends a lot of time in her interview going, okay, here's this accomplishment. Okay, well, when did you do this? For who did you do it? She ends up drawing arrows back down to the work history section. That's spending a lot of time and wasted time in an interview if you have to do that. But there are a couple of examples of where a skills-based or functional resume might be helpful. In this example, this person's a graphic designer. No matter where she went in her job, she remained a graphic designer. Paralegals, medical office assistants. Sometimes your job is similar everywhere you go. It's just that maybe the industry or the content or maybe the size of the company is different. In cases like that, if you were to use a chronological and put your bullets underneath your jobs, it might feel like you're repeating and repeating and repeating. And for that reason, a skills-based resume might be a better way of doing it. Another example I would say is for somebody who, let's just say you left the workforce 15 years ago, you were doing sales, and you totally don't want to do sales anymore, and you really have found your passion in your volunteer work. And the passion is meeting planning, event planning, and you've done a ton of it over the past 15 years for nonprofits, for your kids' schools, etc. But you have done it for a lot of different organizations. And so if you were to add all that in, it would look like you were all over the place. And so a skills-based resume is kind of a way to kind of umbrella it and to kind of package it in a way that's a bit more digestible. So that's an example of where a functional resume might be better. Okay. And honestly, to really be able to tell you what would be better, I would probably have to have at least a 10-minute conversation or 15-minute conversation with you to sort of really understand not only what you've done, but again, what you want to do next. And that would help me figure out what resume would be best for you. So talk to people. Okay, I'm going to go through the resume and give you tips according to the sections of the resume. And so I've organized this part of the webinar from top to bottom, kind of how it might look on a resume. But I have one huge caveat for you. Other than the contact information at the top of the resume and the profile next, your resume sections, what you call them and how they're ordered, can vary. So this is just a way to structure this part of the webinar. You do not have to use the headings I do. As a matter of fact, changing it up can be helpful, and you don't have to put it in the order that I have, and you definitely don't have to include everything. If there's a heading where you don't have anything to put down and you just put fluff, that I'd rather not see the heading at all on a resume. So remember, this is just a guide. Contact information. My tip here is because that piece of paper is expensive real estate and you want to use as much of it as you can, but at the same time, you don't want to cram everything. I tend to double click on the header and put the person's name and their contact information right in the header. That moves everything up about a ½ inch, and it gives you more space to write the substance. So I tend to use 18 to 24 point font for the name. You want your name to be bold, you want it to be bigger. And then I tend to use 10 or 11 point font for the contact information. And I tend to put the contact information horizontally across using that vertical line space on your computer just to separate the email and the phone and the address. That's a great way to save space. Using social media, like your LinkedIn profile link and your resume is great, but if you're going to do that, make sure you're active and engaged on LinkedIn. Otherwise, if somebody's going to go over to LinkedIn from your resume, online resume, and they see that you don't have a picture and that you barely have any contacts and that you're not active, it gives them a negative impression of you. So only put it on if it's going to give you a positive impression. we've talked about the profile, the importance of the profile. So the profile is what the objective used to be. There's no longer an objective. The objective is old school. It's what was in it for me, the job seeker. I am looking for a blah, 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 blah. Instead, the profile, it's reversed. It's what do you bring to the table so that when I read it, because now it's really all about the hiring manager, the recruiter, when I read it, can I figure out what you can do for me? Okay. So any sizzle you can give your profile, something to go, wow. You want it to be specific, but you want it to also show your top skills and show your level of experience. This is a great place if you are re-entering after a gap. And I'm not talking like a short COVID gap. I'm talking of a longer career break gap. It's a great way for you in a very positive way, very quickly, show that you are eager to return to work after a career break, not by going into excruciatingly painful detail about the number of kids and why you left the workforce and how many years, but just saying, eager to re-enter into an accounting role using my, advanced Excel skills, for example, or show here that you're eager to transition. Because if you don't tell me you're eager to transition, I might look at all your job titles as an accountant and go, why is she applying to this HR entry level or junior level HR role? So tell people why you are eager to transition from a back office accounting role to more of a customer facing HR role or something like that. Okay. So here is an example of a profile. If you read it, it sounds okay. Results-oriented professional, known for driving growth and revenue, extremely organized, diverse skill set, relationship builder, excellent communication skills, thrives in a fast-paced environment. You might read it and go, that's impressive. But what does this tell me as I'm reading it, the hiring manager? What does this person do? Is this person in operations? Is this person a marketing person, salesperson, biz dev? I can't tell. To me, this is too fluffy. It is too full of fluff words, and it doesn't really tell me a whole lot. Here's the same person, same experience, same resume. Results-oriented business development professional with 15 years of experience driving growth for mid-sized IT companies. Now I know a little bit more. If I'm an IT company, I'm going to perk up. If I'm looking for a more seasoned biz dev person, I'm going to perk up. Successful at developing long-term relationships with key stakeholders in DoD, DOJ, intelligence communities. If I'm a government contractor and I am looking to get into the Department of Justice, I want to talk to this person. I want to dig deeper. So what have you done for DOJ? What relationships do you have? How could those relationships be helpful to me? I'm gonna want to interview this person, okay? So this is why that profile is really important. Now, if this person was tired of the government contracting space and, all right, tired of the government contracting and wanted to do something different, I might say to them, take out the government contracting. Talk about the relationships you have with commercial providers. Take out the government agencies. Talk about maybe some other types of relationships that you have done that were successful. Sorry, you guys, my battery's running low, so I've got to plug my computer in before it dies. Okay, sorry about that. We're good to go. So that's why this profile is important. So moving down from there, next, usually, but not always, is your professional experience. What I would say here, and there's a lot of miscommunication out there if you start to Google this stuff, but I really do feel strongly about this, and based on my experience working with people who often have gaps in their resumes, don't draw attention to it. Yes, show me on your resume that while you have not been working, you have been keeping your skills sharp, you've been doing some great volunteer work, or even you've been doing some good project work. But don't tell me career hiatus, 10 years break to raise my children, or, 1 year break for personal reasons. I'm not going to hire you because you took a 1-year break or a 10-year break. I'm going to hire you because you have something of value to give me. So tell me about that value. Tell me about those skills, not drawing attention to the gap. So don't put in as a placeholder, head of household, 2020 to 2021. Instead, show me through maybe your volunteer section, show me by in your profile saying you're eager to re-enter, that you're ready to get back to work. Your experience is chronological, but don't hide the good stuff. So I say this because a lot of people who have even short gaps try to fill that gap in. They're so paranoid about the gap. They talk about their seasonal work at the Gap or their work as an Uber driver. And if that's not what you want to do, and it doesn't really show the best skills that you have, and something below that, like the prior job that you had, even if it was 5 years ago, is the substance is really impressive, you don't want that on your second page or on the bottom half of your first page of your resume. So keep the good stuff and elevate it. In your professional experience, if you've done some pro bono work, if you've done some pro bono consulting work, a lot of times people do that if they have a gap. You can put it in there. Just be honest. If it's volunteer or pro bono, convey that. Be transparent. And I would maybe put unpaid work there. I'd prefer to see it in the volunteer section or community service section, but some people have had such substantive work that they've done on a volunteer basis. Maybe they do it 20 hours a week or 15 hours a week. And you've held really high level roles and your accomplishments are impressive and they are also related to what you want to do next, then absolutely put it in this section, okay? If a job that you had was, you only had it for 6 months, maybe 8 years ago, you had a job for 6 months and it was a horrible experience. And if somebody is going to ask you about it, it's going to exude a lot of negative energy, take it out, take it out. Or if you take out a job that is completely not relevant to what you want to do next. Or if you have older jobs, you don't have to, I don't have you can only go back 15 years, or you can only go back 10 years. If there's a job prior to that that's really tells a great part of your story, keep it in there. But you don't have to have 15 bullets for that job. 1 bullet might be enough. And I would even argue after 15 years, just the job, company, and the job title is probably sufficient, okay? Make sure that the company name stands out in the job title. I like to differentiate between the two. So put one in bold, put the other in italics, or use different fonts. What should come first, the company or the job? It really depends. My coworker, my business partner, she likes to see the job title first and then the company. I like to see the company and then the job title. Subjective. The only thing I would say is that for some people, the company name, if you work for an Amazon, you might want to have that front and center. If your job title is really impressive, but the company is lesser known, maybe the job title first. It doesn't really matter which way you do it, though. There's not a wrong way. And definitely provide dates. It doesn't matter how old you are or how long ago the job was. You need to provide start and end dates, at least for the part that's going to be in your chronological. Sometimes people have other experience that is really dated but interesting. You might just list it without a date, but certainly for the recent stuff, you need dates. Next is your volunteer, community leadership, community service, whatever you want to name it. For people with gaps, for people in transition, oftentimes what you do as a volunteer is, if you smart volunteer, is a way to show people that you've kept your skills sharp and that you've done things and produced things. So for people with gaps and people in transition, this section is super important. If you don't have a gap, it's not as important, but sometimes it gives it a little bit of flavor to your resume. It tells you something. And let's face it, people who have similar values and similar volunteer values, sometimes it's a way to entice somebody to want to interview you. But does it add value? Focus on the substantive stuff. You know, if you work for political organizations or religious organizations and it's something that you don't want to advertise, then maybe you take it out. So here, oftentimes just a listing of your title, the nonprofit, and the dates is sufficient. For other people, if you have done some really substantive stuff, add some bullets to your volunteer work, okay? So don't apologize for any gaps that you have. Give it some value by really being confident and proud of what you've done in your volunteer work. So here's 2 examples. This is the same resume. This woman came in, clearly she was out of the workforce for a while and she was a super active volunteer. That's how she kept her skills sharp while she was out of work. This listing that she has, while it tells me that she's done a lot of volunteer work, it's a lot. Here's a redo. Same resume, same person. I would argue that saying less in this example, less is more. She's highlighting the more substantive volunteer work. She's highlighting the volunteer work that's much more related to what she wants to do. She's picking out the organizations that might be better known. And to me, that is much more impressive and impactful than the longer version right here. Okay. Education, training. So the rule of thumb is that the more seasoned worker that you are, the lower your education goes, because your work experience trumps education. So that's why a college kid, recent college grad, is going to have the education at the top of their page. They don't have a whole lot of work experience. So what they studied, the types of courses they took, maybe some of the activities they did in college has much more value than if you have 10, 15, 20 years of work experience. The one exception, super important, is that if you are transitioning and you took some certifications to show that you're really motivated to transition into human resources, for example, and you took your SHRM certification, or you want to get into accounting and you took your QuickBooks certification or a bookkeeping certification, that's showing the hiring manager that you're motivated and that your skills are sharp. And for people that have gaps in their resumes, the concern is that you've let your technical skills get rusty. So this is a great way of countering it, is by highlighting your recent certifications or skills. You can do that in your profile at the top, or if you went back and got a degree or got like a really, intensive certification, you might want to put that at the top of your resume, not at the bottom. Skills, certifications, awards, memberships. Sometimes you have a separate section for this. I would actually argue now these days, I tend to put education and skills in the same section. I combine them. So I put down the degree, and then I might put in bold skills, colon, or technical skills, and then I list them out horizontally using commas. You can do it that way. If you haven't gotten a certification or you don't have any memberships, don't worry, don't put this section in. Oftentimes awards are also great examples of accomplishments, and they sometimes can get folded into your accomplishment bullets underneath your job, your professional experience as well. But what's important here is that the older you are, the longer your gap, make sure you highlight any kind of technical proficiency and even basic workplace readiness proficiency. If you are re-entering after a break, the concern is that you're not up to date on the work productivity software that we use every day in business, like Zoom, like Microsoft Word, Google Office Suite. If you have a gap, it's important to put include those skills on your resume. Okay, so my suggestions here is targeting resumes is really important. When you see a job description, take a look at those keywords. if you think you're qualified for that job, and take a look at what keywords is being used in that resume and make sure that you incorporate those keywords into your resume. Sometimes the keyword is just that there's a new way of saying things. For example, customer service. Now a lot of it's customer success. Incorporate that lingo into your resume. But at the same time, be careful for not distorting what you did. Because if you over target your resume to mimic a job description, and all of a sudden you distort what you did, maybe you'll get the interview, but you're going to bomb the interview because they're going to start to ask you questions and you're not going to be able to answer the questions. So I would just be really careful. And I think it's best, no matter what, that you have one go-to resume. So you're not quite sure, you're in a networking event, you meet somebody, somebody refers you to somebody, you're not really sure what type of job might be available with them. Send them that one resume that just rounds you out, best reflects what you want to do, right? And then keep that as your sacred resume. And as you go to target, use that to target. So you can throw skills in and out of your resumes. Just because you ought to be highlighting on your resume, I would say 3, maybe 5 at most top key skills on your resume. If you have more than that, you look like you're all over the place and people don't know what to do with you. But that doesn't mean you can't swap in and out different skills. So for one resume, maybe you're going to highlight your marketing skills. For another resume, maybe you're going to highlight your event planning skills, okay? But consider having like a Word document where you put all of your accomplishments down and then you pull from that and build your resume based on the job description. And then lastly here, say it once, say it well, be concise. The shorter, the better. Less is more, but it needs to be impactful. And then share your resume with somebody you trust, because we don't see our own mistakes. And there's a lot of companies out there, if they see something glaring and what's glaring to them, you've looked at your resume so much, it's not glaring to you, you don't see the spelling error, they might put you in the no pile just because of an error. So it's really important to share your resume and get feedback, and also to make sure that it's grammatically correct. That is the end of my presentation. I'm going to put my contact information up here. That's our website, web address. You can connect with us on social media. We have a DC Metro FlexProfessionals has a Facebook page, so do we also do on LinkedIn. To the right there, Sheila Murphy, that's me. That's my email. I do these webinars because I have access to jobs, and I make money by placing good candidates into good companies. So don't hesitate to send me an email to, if you do, because you're interested in our part-time model, put your resume in our system first. That way, when you send me the email, tell me that you're a Loudoun candidate, you met me through the public library. We've gotten great candidates through Loudoun Library. We've placed a lot of great candidates. I'm going to make note of that in my system, but I need your resume in there first. So make sure you put your resume in first. That's it for me. Are there any questions, Jeremy?
Yeah, we have 2, it looks like. Okay. Someone asked what the most common mistake you see in resumes. Is there something that you see frequently that someone should avoid when writing their resume?
What's a common mistake? I would say the biggest mistake is putting too much on there because people don't read, and then in putting, not targeting it, being specific enough. So like I said, sometimes you see at the top of a resume, somebody says what they're good at, and they almost tell you too much. I'm great at events, and I'm great at marketing, and I'm great at operations, and I'm great at sales and business development. And then I'm kind of like, okay, well, what is it you really want to do? And so if you're all over the place, I think from the job seeker's perspective, you think, okay, well, I got to cast that wide net. I'm going to go all over the place, and somebody will just kind of pick that one thing and I'll be fine with it. But instead, the person reading it goes, oh, gosh, this person doesn't know what they want to do. And I'm not going to hire somebody that doesn't know what they want to do. So I think that's probably the biggest mistake I see.
Okay, cool. We have some other questions pop up. What if you have worked at one place for a long time and changed roles within that company? Do you break those roles out by date?
I would. So I call it umbrellaing. So the fact that you've worked for a long time at one company is a really good thing. It shows longevity. It shows that they liked you, especially if you've gotten promoted. That's a really great thing. So you want to put context there. So sometimes people go Lockheed Martin, proposal assistant. And then the next thing is Lockheed Martin, proposal manager, Lockheed Martin, proposal director. And if I quickly look at that resume, I go, okay, they've worked for 3 different companies because again, we're lazy readers. What I would do is Lockheed Martin, I would put the dates of entirety that you worked there. And then I would put your job title, and along with that job title in parentheses, I would put the dates that you had that job and then the bullets. And then I put your next job title, the dates that you had that job and the bullets below. So that's one way of doing it. Sometimes you've been at a company for so long and the job that you have now is really where the substance is and it's what you want to do next, then maybe you just list out all the different jobs and then just have the job titles down under the first job. So there's lots of different ways that you can do it. Another just along that same line, sometimes people struggle who do project work, that if they list all their projects down on their resume, they look like they've job hopped, which is really not the case. For something like that, umbrella-ing it is a really good thing too. So make yourself an independent consultant or a contractor, and then put something down like, provide, communications consulting, a selection of clients or projects to include, and then let each bullet be the different project or client. So that's another way of just kind of packaging it in a way that allows the reader to understand your story. So this whole process is, I hate to say it, but it's dumbing it down for a reader that doesn't know a whole lot about what you do, simplifying it for a reader who's like tired and doesn't want to read too much.
Okay. And then the last question we have is, do you provide a service to review our resume, although we are seeking a federal versus a private industry job?
We do resume reviews. If you're interested, you can send me an email and I can send you a link to sign up for one. We do not specialize in federal. Federal is a different bear. And the way you write a federal resume and you put it in their system is very different than for private sector. So if you're looking for a job at a government agency, we're not the company for you, but there's a lot of free resources out there for how to write a federal resume. So I would Google it.
Okay. Cool. Well, I appreciate your time, Sheila. That was very informative, and thanks for everyone for attending.